Cooking was never just a hobby for me, it was the very rhythm of my life. My kitchen wasn't just a space with utensils and spices, it was my sanctuary, a place where laughter sizzled with oil and tears blended with the salt of my soups. Each recipe I created carried a memory, a story, a piece of my soul. When I was 12, I baked my first cake for my mother's birthday. It wasn't perfected, the frosting dripped unevenly. The sponge was a little too densey, but she smiled as though I had served her a masterpiece. That moment etched into me. Food was my language of love. From then on, I filled countless notebooks with experiments, notes about textures, tweaks, and flavor balances. Every page was a testament to my devotion. My sister, Clara, never seemed interested in food. She'd roll her eyes whenever I carried another tray of cookies to the living room or asked her to test a new stew. "You're wasting your time," she'd often say, flicking through her phone. To her, cooking was messy and unglamorous, not worth the long hours I spent bent over simmering pots, or so I thought. One Friday evening, my parents invited me for what they called a special dinner. They wouldn't say why, only that it was important and I had to be there. I arrived with a bottle of homemade pomegranate syrup, something I had perfected over years. The dining room glowed with soft lighting. My parents looked excited, Clara smug. The table was set with more care than usual, as though we were hosting royalty. I sat, curious, waiting for the reveal. After dessert, my father stood up, his voice booming with pride. "Everyone," he said, "we have an announcement. Clara has achieved something remarkable. She has written her very own cookbook." He gestured, and Clara, glowing as though she had won an Oscar, pulled out a thick, glossy draft. On the cover, her name was printed in bold, elegant letters. My heart skipped. She opened the book and began reading aloud, recipe after recipe. And with every word, my stomach dropped further into the abyss. Because they weren't her recipes, they were mine, every single one. The rosemary lemon tart I perfected last summer. The saffron rice my grandmother taught me to improve. The butternut squash soup with a dash of cinnamon I guarded as my secret. They were all thoroughly stolen, stripped of my name, and paraded as hers. My parents clapped. My father hugged her. My mother had tears in her eyes. And I sat frozen, a hollow ache spreading through my chest. Clara caught my gaze, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. She knew exactly what she'd done. Applause echoed in my ears like a cruel mockery. Everyone in that room believed Clara was some culinary genius. They praised her for her creativity and dedication, words that once described me. I forced a smile, but inside, my world cracked open. The betrayal cut deeper than I could process. These weren't just recipes, they were pieces of my heart, my late nights, my sacrifices. I remembered staying up until dawn testing a bread recipe 20 different ways until the crust broke just right. I remembered burning my hand while caramelizing sugar, only to finally master it after weeks of trial. And now, Clara had stolen all of it, with no remorse. "Isn't she brilliant?" My mother beamed, squeezing Clara's hand. "She always had it in her," my father added proudly. "She really surprised us." My aunt chimed in, sipping her wine. I wanted to scream. "No, she didn't. She didn't surprise you. She stole from me." But my voice stayed trapped in my throat. Memories flooded back, moments I had dismissed before. Clara wandering into the kitchen at odd hours, casually watching me chop vegetables, asking harmless questions like, "What spice did you just add?" Or "How long do you let it sit?" I had thought she was making small talk. I never realized she was taking notes. Even worse, I remembered the day my recipe journals went missing. I tore the house apart, furious, thinking I'd misplaced them. Clara had helped me look, pretending to care. They had never resurfaced. Until now, humiliation wrapped around me like a shroud. I was invisible at that table, erased by the very people who were supposed to know me best. That night, lying awake in my bed, my tears tasted bitter. My family had chosen Clara's lie over my truth. She had taken my passion, my years of work, and built a throne for herself. But deep inside, something shifted. Betrayal had lit a fire in me, and I wasn't going to let her steal my life's work without consequence. For days, I went quiet. I let Clara bask in the glory. She gave interviews, took calls from publishers, and planned her book launch as though she were the next Julia Child. My parents paraded her around, showing off their talented daughter. But while they celebrated, I plotted. I began gathering evidence. My old hard drives contained dated recipe drafts. My email was filled with messages I had sent to myself over the years, documenting each stage of development. Photos of me testing dishes, timestamps on blog drafts, and private conversations with friends who had tasted my creations, all proof that the recipes were mine long before Clara touched them. I also reached out to Chef Ramirez, a well-respected local restaurateur. He had once tried my rosemary lemon tart at a community event and even asked if I'd consider working with him. When I explained what happened, he didn't hesitate to support me. "I'll vouch for you," he said firmly. Meanwhile, Clara grew cockier. She strutted around the house with a superiority that made my skin crawl. She mocked my failed attempts and implied I should be grateful she was putting our family name on the map. I bit my tongue. Revenge, I reminded myself, is best served cold. I learned the date of her book launch dinner, a grand event where publishers, food critics, and local influencers would gather. Perfect. That was where I would strike. My plan was simple but devastating. Let her shine at her peak, then pull the rug out from under her with undeniable evidence. The night of the launch arrived. The venue glittered with chandeliers, the tables set with fine china. Clara wore a designer dress, her hair styled like a celebrity chef walking the red carpet. She stood at the podium, gushing about her creative journey. I watched, calm and silent, as she flipped through the cookbook pages, describing dishes that weren't hers. Guests applauded. Cameras flashed. Finally, when the applause reached its peak, I stood. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. "Before we go further, I have something important to share." All eyes turned to me. Clara's confident smile faltered. I stepped forward and pulled out my folder of evidence. One by one, I laid it out: screenshots of dated recipe drafts, photographs of me cooking those dishes years ago, emails time-stamped long before Clara's so-called inspiration. The room shifted from admiration to disbelief. Gasps echoed as I explained how my recipe journals had been stolen. Chef Ramirez stood beside me, confirming my authorship. Food bloggers I had contacted in advance nodded, holding up posts I had written years earlier. Clara's face turned pale. She stammered, tried to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Guests whispered, shocked. Publishers exchanged uneasy glances. My parents sat frozen, their pride crumbling into shame. The mask Clara had worn for months shattered in front of everyone. Her false empire collapsed in a single night. The fallout was swift and brutal. Publishers pulled out of Clara's deal within days. Food critics exposed the plagiarism, and online backlash spread like wildfire. Her reputation was destroyed before it had even begun. Meanwhile, I launched my own cookbook, this time under my rightful name. The same publishers who had dropped Clara reached out to me instead. With Chef Ramirez's endorsement and the support of food bloggers, my work gained traction. For the first time, my recipes were credited where they belonged, to me. Clara retreated into silence, avoiding the public eye. My parents, drowning in regret, tried to make amends. They apologized, but the damage lingered. Trust, once broken, is never fully restored. Yet despite everything, I didn't feel bitter. I felt whole again. My recipes, my passion, my truth, and they were finally mine once more. Revenge hadn't come through cruelty or lies. It came through patience, truth, and letting Clara's own greed unravel her. As I signed copies of my cookbook at a bustling bookstore, I realized something profound. Betrayal may burn like fire, but just I see it slowly, surely Servita tastes sweeter than any dish I could ever create. And that was the dish I savored most of all.